This is nothing. Well, it's something, but more specifically, it's the Nothing Phone 1. And it might just be the most interesting phone to come out of 2022. Now the reason for this is that for a first attempt, it seems like Nothing has really honed down on making the phone more premium than the price tag would suggest. All with its, some ways, unique pizzazz. So let's start with that first. Now for better or for worse, the main talking point for most people is going to be that clear back panel. We've not seen this in any other phone other than maybe a Xiaomi here and there. And then you've also got that elevated by the unique LED glyph effect. Now in terms of actual practicality, in my opinion, it's hardly a selling point. It definitely looks cool, but honestly, unless you're someone who always puts the phone face down on a table when you're not using it like this, you're not going to notice it. Being a gadget geek, a little part of me dies when even the faintest of scratches appear on the screen of my phone. So most of the time, you can bet my phone is going to be facing up when I put it down on a table, meaning I ain't going to be seeing those glyphs. Now sure, all of these LEDs may give more light when shooting photos and video, but honestly, I didn't really notice a difference. Plus, I could probably count on one hand the number of times I've actually used the rear LED for content creation. It probably works quite well as a torch at night, but to me, that's probably all it's going to be useful for. Now with that out of the way, let's talk things that actually matter and is why I really like this phone. So we're going to start with the other side, the front. Arguably one of the most important parts of a phone, since 99% of the time, it's what we interact with. As a package, we have to give big props to Nothing for what they've built here. It's got a beautiful 6.55-inch flat OLED 1080p display. I also love the fact that it has completely symmetrical bezels all around, and it's a variable 120Hz screen. This is a feature usually reserved for flagship phones, but we've got one here at a mid-range price, so that's awesome. Using the phone is super smooth, colors are vibrant, and there's hardly any color shift, and it's been an absolute pleasure to use. Of course, there's been some controversy surrounding the phone's brightness, where it's meant to be capable of some pretty bright levels of up to 1200 nits, but for technical reasons is capped at 700. Bit of a shame that it can't live up to its potential, but aside from using it outdoors in all but the brightest days, the Nothing phone has been absolutely fine, and honestly, if this is their starting point, I've got no doubts about their future. Now what I also love about the phone is its design. Of course, it sports a flat frame design that gets suspiciously close to a certain fruit-named phone, but as Picasso once said, good artists borrow, great artists steal. And they've certainly taken inspiration from all the right places, because I love this form factor. You've got that brushed aluminium frame with flat front and rear glass with just the right amount of heft, and that means it feels much more expensive than it actually is. Plus, like the iPhones, the phone can also join the club of being one of the easiest to install screen protectors. Not that it's necessary though, because it comes with one pre-installed. Something I wish more manufacturers did for us. I can't tell you how many times I've started using a new phone, and within the first hour of using it, chucking it in my pocket, you've got some rogue lint or dust leaving tiny little faint scratches on the top. Ugh, it's so soul destroying. Okay, let's not be dramatic now, and let's talk about something else I like about this phone, and that's the haptics. This is an important but often overlooked feature that makes a huge difference in how premium a phone feels, in my opinion. Just compare how a modern iPhone with its Taptic engine or a Pixel 6 Pro or S22 Ultra feels compared to your typical cheap mid-range phone with a small tinny motor, and you'll get an idea of what premium really feels like. And the phone definitely sits in the company of the best, and I'm glad Nothing didn't cheap out here. It's not quite as tight and subtle with its taps and clicks like an iPhone, but it definitely gives a confident tap when swiping or typing on the keyboard. So thanks Nothing, keep that up. Now what also impressed me about the phone were its speakers, which again is often overlooked by phones in this category. Most of these phones in mid-range categories often go for a single down-firing speaker instead, but not here. The Phone 1 has a stereo speaker setup and does get pretty loud. For the casual consumer of music and video and YouTube and whatnot, in a vacuum it sounds great and sounds about as good as any phone like a Galaxy S32 for example. It's not going to win any audiophile awards, but it's still way better than any single speaker setup. So aside from its price, the other reason that it can be considered a mid-range phone is that it rocks a Snapdragon 778G Plus and not your typical Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chip that you see in all the other flagships. And you know what? For this price, I think that's exactly the right move. Mid-range in 2022 is not the same as mid-range 5 years ago. The actual tangible difference between a flagship chip and a mid-range chip nowadays is a lot smaller, and for 90% of what most people use a phone for, there's not going to be any difference. The Pixel 5 proved this point a few years ago, having had a mid-range chip, and yet it still performed as smooth as any equivalent flagship phone. Now, in addition to having 5G, the Nothing phone handles normal day-to-day tasks like social media, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all that sort of stuff with ease. And whilst I'm not a massive mobile gamer, in the few games that I do play from time to time, it's been pretty solid. Sure, you're not going to get the highest frame rates, but for most casual gamers like me, it'll do the job. With over a couple of months of use, it's been pretty solid with no hints of slowdown or software jank. And I think this is also part thanks to Nothing's pretty vanilla interpretation of Android. Honestly, I think it's actually more vanilla than a Pixel, and that means there's no bloatware weighing it down. There are a few areas where you can see Nothing's branding here and there with its fancy, unique little font in the system menu headings, in widgets and whatnot, but it's never obnoxious. And I like the fact that Nothing also adopted the same always on display on the Pixels, aside from just the font. And you've got other little tweaks here and there, like in the quick panel, slightly different with larger circle menus on the top when fully expanded. But other than that, it looks and feels pretty much like vanilla Android. But this is also an area where I think it probably could do with a bit of refining. It can be jarring sometimes to see the sort of dot matrix-like futuristic font design sitting right next to these stock Android font and UI elements. It would have been really cool to see them completely embrace the branding and maybe give us an option to change the entire theme of the phone to somewhat match this futuristic design language to the rest of the UI with the fonts, quick menus, and icons. And maybe whilst we're at it, maybe give us a little bit more launcher customizability with app grid sizing and icon sizing. I feel like having that would have helped provide an even more cohesive user experience. But at this point, I'm just nitpicking. Though with Nothing's track record of pumping out improvements via regular software updates, it could happen, you never know. But the other element that also needs a bit of refining is the fingerprint sensor, which for me is just about okay. The first complaint I have is that for me, the position is too low. When the phone is as big as it is, the sensor would work in a slightly higher position like you see with the Galaxy S22 or the Pixel 6. Then when it works, it is snappy, but accuracy has been a little hit and miss. But like the Pixel 6, I'm sure this can be improved with regular software optimization. Then the other area that could be improved as well is in battery life. It's got a 4,500 mAh unit inside, and it's bang on average with my current use. On an average day, I've been just about getting to the end of the day, and we're talking 5% by about 11:30 PM after a full day starting at 8. Screen on time has been in the region of 4 hours, maybe 5 if I'm lucky. And one explanation has been that for a long time, the Nothing phone hasn't had Google's adaptive battery feature until a recent software update. So it'll take a little bit of extra and a little bit longer use, so keep your eyes peeled for an update. And so only time will tell if battery life gets better. Thankfully though, despite having a mid-range chip, it still has wireless charging, which is amazing because I have wireless chargers all over the place and they're becoming more and more common. This is just another feature that helps elevate the Nothing phone to something more than a mid-range phone, since this is another feature that's often missing in this category, the Pixel 6a included. And that's probably the closest competitor to the Nothing phone in this range. So if you've got wireless charging pads around the place, the phone can still be conveniently topped up, making the slightly average battery life a non-issue. Then finally, you've got the cameras, often another major component that gets sacrificed in the name of price. Unfortunately, it's not the same story here. Now don't get me wrong, the cameras in the Nothing phone aren't going to win any head-to-head competition against the flagships anytime soon, but they've definitely shown a commitment to providing a really decent everyday all-rounder. It started off pretty rough, but with repeated software updates, it keeps getting better. So you'll see that it's a 2-lens system, which is pretty standard for pretty much any good phone nowadays that aren't the top flagships. There's a 50 megapixel ultra wide and a 50 megapixel main shooter. And none of these ridiculous depth or macro lenses we so often see in cheaper phones pretending to look like a flagship system. The pictures it makes are nice in good lighting, and it definitely shows a bit of weakness in lower light. There's night mode as well, which does take a little bit longer than the best to shoot, but despite that, I think it still does a decent job given its competitors. Again, its closest competitor in this range is going to be the Pixel 6a, and with repeated software updates and improvements, I can honestly say that it's really not that different between the two now, with the Pixel possibly being just a little bit more consistent and reliable in most settings. For the most part though, the Nothing phone is absolutely fine for most people, with good detail, good dynamic range, and it tends to do quite well exposing the scene with no real issues with color. Then you've got the front selfie camera, which is a 16 megapixel shooter that also makes photos with decent level of quality, showing decent details and accuracy, and it's not too soft. It's not autofocusing, but not even all flagships have an autofocusing front camera. I'm looking at you, Google Pixel. So, as an overall package, the Nothing phone is about a B+, and the regular software updates do seem to have had a noticeable improvement in camera quality compared to the first few firmware iterations. It's great to see that resources still continue to be pulled into the goal of improving the camera quality, and honestly, for a first attempt, it's pretty promising. So ultimately, the Nothing phone is priced like a mid-range device, and it would be easy to assume there'd be a whole bunch of shortcomings. But not here. The magic sauce that Nothing has sprinkled over this phone has resulted in a phone that, despite its measly starting price of 750 Australian dollars, it feels equally as premium as phones twice its price tag. And whilst this has been a great first phone for Nothing, this makes me even more excited for a flagship Nothing phone, and maybe a Pro model in the future. Overall, it's been an absolute delight to use over the last couple of months, and objectively, it's a no-brainer for anyone shopping for a phone in this price range. But what do you guys think of the Nothing phone? I'd love to hear your thoughts about this highly regarded phone and how your experience has been. Let me know in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like, subscribe for more, and ding the bell icon so you don't miss out. And I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.